Okay, so I'm gonna start up, and if maybe you can all introduce yourself and speak a little bit about the inspiration and the creative process behind each of your films, please.
Hi there, I'm Calyx Passailaigue. I'm the writer and producer of the film 1968. And yeah, I mean, I guess the inspiration for me with this project was I've always really been interested in the 60s, and I've always really been interested in the civil rights movement and just that sort of period in history. I always found it just really, I guess, a fascinating time. And so, yeah, I guess sort of this idea of creating that dialogue in maybe a more nuanced way than we've seen before of black and white and sort of the, I guess, different sort of sides of the left. You have the more sort of academic, sort of white guy who's this very sort of giving, I guess, maybe a more classical sort of liberal response versus the black radical who's more of like, I guess, giving more of a sort of hardline response. And yeah, I guess just sort of how that applies to sort of, you know, the things we can sort of take from that period in time and taking that sort of how, I guess, the implications that we can see from that. So, yeah.
Hi there, I'm Rota. I was the director of 1968, and Calyx pitched the script to me, and I loved it. I didn't at the time know a ton about the history, and I was blown away to find out that in 1968, when like the final bills were passed to make the civil, like to kind of end the civil rights movement and things like that, was one of the most violent years. So it blew me away that like the time in history when, you know, things became, you know, quote unquote equal between blacks and whites, it was like one of the most violent years between them. So that blew me away, and I want to tell that story because I felt a lot of people didn't know that either.
And certainly to promote the people who are allies and help them help us.
I was going to say that 1968 story, and you're talking about racism and sexism, the 1968 story needs to be told many, many, many more times. Like the white allies with the civil rights movement, you know, very powerful stories there, and very important stories.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I guess just speaking from 1968, our standpoint with that really was sort of, to me, it was the whole point of making that film, you know. An interesting thing was like when we were in film school, where we made this film together, we were sort of criticized for that character being like viewed as like a white savior or something, or saying, and like, you know, there's that sort of trope, right, in media, but I never felt it was that way because I think in our mind it was always that idea of meeting someone in the middle and meeting them on their level and maybe taking a second to figure out where that level is, but just listening and you know, eventually sort of trying to get to a place where you can understand where that person's coming from, you know.
Yeah,
so
and learning. Because I guess that there's that place of like, you know, allowing your, like, you have all your opinions of things and how things are, and then allowing yourself to stop for a second and listen and really like drop your bias, drop your preference, and just listen to, you know, because we, like, in the film, it is really like the white guy thinks he knows what's right, and for a second he drops what he thinks knows what's right, and listens to what is right and what has to happen, and that was something that we think, you know, like, same thing with this.
Yeah.
Same thing with this. It's not like, doesn't have to be a race thing, doesn't have to be a sex thing. It could be just a human thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.